In this video, I'll show you how to visualize SpaceX launch data by using Python, Flask, and a little bit of HTML and CSS. At the end of the video, I'll even show you how we deploy this web application so you can view this from your phone or really any other computer around the world. Now, what exactly we'll be doing here is using the SpaceX API. This is a free API that everyone can access. We'll be getting all of the information about the past and upcoming launches and then displaying that on a web page. With that said, let me give you a quick demo here so you can see what the project will look like once we're finished. All right, so the finished project is in front of me, and you can see that I'm simply listing out some basic information about all of the different SpaceX launches. So here I have the successful launches, we also have the failed ones, and then the upcoming launches. And if we go to something like failed here, you can see that it says the reason for the failure, and then there's the date, and it kind of links to some more information. Now, there's a bunch of other data that we're going to pull from the API that you can use however you want. You can visualize it in a graph. You can put it in some kind of table. You can view all of the launches that were recent or that are coming up. You can do really anything that you want. I just wanted to get a basic website set up here so you guys got some idea for a potential for the project you could potentially build or how you could extend this project once you finish making it. Now, just to quickly show this to you, if I go here to the SpaceX GitHub, I'm just going to scroll through some of the information you get access to. So let's see here. Details, failures, the crew, the ships, the capsules, the launch pad. You can see that I'm using just a very small subset of this data, and you can make this project a lot cooler than what I have right here. So that's pretty much it for the demo. If you guys want to learn a bit more about Python, how to interact with APIs, and how to make a setup like this using mostly purely Python and a little bit of HTML and CSS, make sure you stick around in this video. I promise you're going to get some value from it. And not only will you have a cool project at the end, but you'll probably learn something about Python and Flask. All right, so we're on the computer now, and I'm just going to go through the basic setup steps, and then we'll actually get into writing the code. So I'm in Visual Studio Code here. I've just opened up a new folder called tutorial. You can write this anywhere that you want, but I recommend you use something like VS Code. Now, the first thing we're actually going to do here is just spin up a server that we're going to use later on to deploy this application. So remember, we're actually going to write the app. We'll do it localhost here, and then we're going to deploy it out so that anyone can view this website. And if you wanted to, you could throw it on something like your resume if you touched it up a bit, and then anyone can access it without having to actually run all of the code. So to do that, we're going to go to actually the sponsor of this video, which is Linode/Akamai. So previously Linode, recently it's kind of been changed to Akamai. It's a bit confusing with the names, but the point is you guys can click the link in the description and then get a free $100 credit that you can use to sign up here. Linode/Akamai is what I use for literally all of my web hosting. I've been using them for over 4 years. Great service, and even if you just use it for this video, you'll see it's super easy, completely free. Again, you can get started for free from the link in the description. So I'm going to sign in here, and then I'm going to show you how we can spin up a virtual private server, and then we'll go from there. All right, so I've signed in here, and you can see that I already have a few servers running. As I was saying, this is literally the only cloud provider that I use. You can see that I have a bunch of volumes, I have some node balancers, I have some domains, I have some databases, I have a Kubernetes cluster, pretty much anything you can imagine I have on Linode here, hence why they've been such a long time sponsor of the channel, so shout out to Linode for that. Anyways, what we want to do here is just create a very basic virtual private server that we're going to use to deploy our application. To do that, we're just going to go to create or to create Linode over here. We're going to select Linode, and then we're going to go through a few of the options here. So there is actually some one-click installs for certain applications. We're not going to use this because we're just going to set it up for ourselves. But you can see that a bunch of apps you might want to run, like a Minecraft server, they actually just have kind of pre-built for you. So anyways, what I'm going to do here for the image is I'm just going to select Debian 11. I'm going to go here to region and just select Toronto, Canada, which is the closest to me. Just select whatever one's closest to you. And then I'm going to go to their cheapest option here, which is the shared CPU. And they have the Nanode 1 GB, which is only $5 per month. Okay, so for the label here, I am just going to call this SpaceX launch like that. And for the password, I'm just going to put in a strong password, and then I will go ahead and press create. So I'll be back once that is finished, and then we'll move on to the next step in the video. All right, so my Linode is now spinning up. We don't actually need to use this second, but it does take a minute or two to spin up, so I just figured we'd do that first, so that we already have the server running when we actually need to use it, which will be near the end of the video. So now let's go back to VS Code, and let's start setting up our application by installing the different dependencies we need for Python and Flask. All right, so we're just going to open up our terminal down here. Let me close this. And we're going to run the command pip install and then Flask. And then we're going to do a space and then requests. Now that's actually all we're going to need for this video. Flask is a lightweight web framework, which I'm going to show you how to use here. Essentially, it allows us to create a website using almost purely Python. Just need a bit of HTML and CSS. And requests is what we can actually use to hit the SpaceX API, which will return some data to us. If you're unfamiliar with APIs, I'm going to talk a bit about how they work in just a few minutes, so bear with me here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and run pip install Flask and requests. That's going to install both of those libraries for us. You can see I already have them installed. Now, if you're on Mac or Linux, you're going to want to change this command to say pip3. So pip3 install, and then that should work for you. If for some reason this command does not work, I will leave 2 videos on the screen and linked in the description that will show you how to fix your pip command for both Mac and for Windows. So I'm just going to clear the screen here. That's pretty much all we need from our terminal. Now what we're going to do is start creating a few directories and files for our application. So we're going to make a main file here called app.py. Let me zoom in a little bit here, just so we can see this a bit easier. And then I'm going to make a directory over here called static, and another directory called templates. Now, it's very important that you name these directories exactly what I have here. So templates and static, that's where we're going to put some of the files that are related to kind of the view of our website or the user interface, okay? Lastly, we're going to go inside of app.py here, and we're going to set up a very basic Flask web server. So let me just spend 1 second talking about Flask here. This is a lightweight web framework in Python, which is really, really good at building simple websites like the one that we're going to be building here. So whenever you just want to have a really simple website spun up in literally a few minutes, I always like to use Flask. So I'm going to show you how it works here and how we can connect this to something called a Jenga templating engine, which is a really powerful way for actually writing Python-like code directly inside of our HTML documents. That way we can avoid all of the JavaScript. We don't need to be an HTML or JavaScript wizard. We can just use our existing Python knowledge to create some pretty decent looking websites. So to begin here, I'm going to say from Flask, import. We're going to import with a capital Flask, and then the function render template. We're then going to say from, if we can go here, date time, import date time. We're going to use this in a little bit. And then we're going to say import requests like this. Request is the library or the module that we can use to actually send a request to get that SpaceX data. So what we'll actually do here is right when we spin up our web server, we'll go retrieve all of that SpaceX data stored in a variable, and then we'll use that and actually display that on our web page. So we're going to begin by creating a Flask app. So we're going to say app is equal to Flask in all capitals. And then inside of here, we're going to put underscore underscore name. Don't worry too much about exactly why we need that, but this is going to act as our Flask app. From here, we're going to say if underscore underscore name underscore underscore equals underscore underscore main, underscore underscore. Then we're going to say app dot run, and we're going to say debug is equal to true. Now, when we say debug equals true, that means that anytime we make a change inside of our Python file, it's automatically going to update the web server for us. So that's what we want when we're debugging, so that way we don't have to constantly keep running the web server. Now, this line here, if name equals main, essentially what this does is just make sure that you ran this Python file directly rather than importing something from this file into another file. That way, we're only going to actually run the web server if we directly run this Python file, not if it's used by a different Python file. Perfect. Now let's just create our first kind of web root. To do this, we're going to say @app.root. And we're going to put a slash here, just meaning if we go to the base route of our website or base root of our website. And we're going to say define index. You can call this function whatever you want, but I'm going to call it index. And then what I'm going to do here is just return a string that says hello world. Now, basically what we do here in Flask when we want to create kind of a page for our website is we start by saying @ and then the name of our app, which in this case is app. And then we say .root. And then we put whatever we want the route or the root to be. In this case, I'm just doing slash. If I want it to be /home, I do /home. If I wanted /about, I do /about, right? Then I create a function. So I say define, and you can call this function whatever you want, but usually you name it something similar to what the route is. And then you can return from here a string, you can return some JSON data, or you can return an HTML document or an HTML template, which we're going to do in just a minute. But for now, just to test things out, we're just going to return hello world, and you'll see how easy it is to actually get this web server running. So now what we're going to do is just open up our terminal where we're in the same directory as our Python application. And we're simply going to say Python and then app.py. Now in VS Code, you also can just hit this button right here and it should run the Python file for you. If you're on Mac or Linux, you're probably going to want to use that Python 3 command. So I'm going to say Python app.py. You're going to see that it spins up a web server for me, and it shows me the address of my web server, which is running on port 5000. What you can do is copy that and put that in your web browser, or you can hit Control and click on that if you're on VS Code, and it's going to bring up the server right here where it says Hello World. There you go. That's pretty much it. We now have a basic Flask app running. Now, just to show you here, if I go and change this to Hello World, and then something like changed, and I save, notice that my web server actually refreshes. And if I refresh here, you can see that changed appears on the screen, and I didn't have to rerun my server. So that's the advantage of running it in debug mode. Now let me just make it a bit smaller because we're going to write some more code. And now what I'm going to do is show you how we render a template, and then we're going to grab that SpaceX data and start displaying that on the screen. So actually we'll leave that open, but I'm just going to close it out of the view for right now. And what we're going to do is go and create an HTML document. So I'm going to go to templates here, and inside of templates, I'm going to say index.html. Now this is going to be the base HTML file that we're going to be working in, where we're going to be displaying pretty much all of our data. Now, we'll get into kind of the templating language in a second, but for now, what we want to do is just create a basic HTML document that has stuff like a title, maybe a body, whatever else we want to put inside of there, and then I'll show you how we display that from the Flask web server. So to get started here in VS Code, we can actually type HTML:5, and what that should do is give you access to this base template that kind of just gives you like a starter boilerplate document for HTML. Now, for some reason that doesn't work for you in VS Code, it may not if you don't have the correct extension. That's fine. Just copy out what I have here, or you can go to the link in the description where all of this code is linked via GitHub, and you can just copy in the document. Now, what I'm going to do is go to my title here, and I'm just going to change this to say SpaceX launches like that. And I'm going to copy in a few things here. So give me 1 sec just to copy these in, and I'll talk to you about what they are. So what I'm copying in here is actually Bootstrap. Now, Bootstrap is what we're going to use to do a little bit of styling and just to give us access to some kind of dynamic elements that we don't typically have. So what you can do if you want to find these tags right here is, again, you can go to the link in the description and just copy them in directly from the GitHub link. Or you can go to the Bootstrap website and you can find them there. But what we want is the style sheet, which has our Bootstrap styles. We then want to have Ajax, which is going to be used for a little bit of dynamic behavior on our page. So switching between kind of the successful, failed, and upcoming launches. And then we need the JavaScript related to our Bootstrap for some different effects and styling that are going on. So you could pause this and copy it out, or again, you can go to that GitHub link in the description. I'll also show you that if we just open up the Bootstrap documentation here, so let's go Bootstrap like that, and we go here, it should actually show us how to add it. So if we go to read the docs, you can see here that it gives us the different tags that we need to add in, okay? So it says include Bootstrap, CSS, and JS, place the link tag in the head, and then it gives us the 2 script tags that we need to include. The ones that I've included might be a little bit outdated, but that's totally fine. So again, you could just go to this website here, Bootstrap, and you can find the page I just went to. All right, so let's get out of that. Let's go back here. Now inside of our body, let's just make an H1 tag that says hello world, and let's see how we can actually render this page. So to do that, we're going to go back to our app.py, and now we're going to go, and instead of returning some string, we're going to return the rendering of a template. So we're going to say return render template. This template is going to be index.html, and now if we go back here and we refresh, you can see that we get hello world, which is our HTML document appearing on the screen. Now, the reason this works is because index.html is inside of the templates folder. If it wasn't inside of there, this would not work. Okay, great. So we're almost done with the setup here. The last thing I want to do is just link a style sheet to my template. So whenever we want to write any CSS, it's a little bit better to put that in a separate style sheet rather than having it directly inside of this document. So to do that, we're going to go into this static directory. We're going to create a new directory called CSS, and we're going to make a new file called styles.css. Okay, so we have styles.css. Now we're going to go back to our index, and we're going to do something a little bit different than what you might assume that's going to allow us to link this style sheet, which is a static asset, inside of this document. To do that, we're going to go inside of our head tag. We can put this anywhere we want, really, but I'm going to say link, and then we're just going to close the tag like that. We're going to say rel is equal to style sheet, and then we are going to say the href, so the location for this style sheet, is equal to, and make sure you have exactly what I put here, so 2 braces, and then URL underscore 4, and then this is going to be static, and we need to make sure we do a different set of quotation marks. I'm going to do single quotation marks here, and then the file name is going to be equal to css/styles.css. Okay, so let me just save that so we get the auto formatting. So what did I just do here? Well, essentially what I'm doing is actually embedding a variable inside of my template. Now, remember I told you that whenever we're working with Flask, we have this Jenga templating engine. Now, we can actually embed variables using these 2 braces like this. So whenever we use 2 braces, even though it doesn't really look like we're embedding a variable, this is actually going to evaluate whatever's inside of these braces as a Python variable. So what we can do is use this function URL4, which is built into Flask, which is going to find us the URL for the static folder, which is where we have our CSS file. And then we need to specify the file name as css/styles.css, which is where we're storing that file. I know it seems a little bit weird, but this is what you need to be able to link your style sheet. And when you're using images and some other static assets, you're going to do a similar thing, but they'd be inside of a different directory. Okay, so now we have our style sheet linked. To prove that to you, if I go here and do something like h1 color blue, and then we go back here and we refresh, you're going to see that, why is that not working? Did I put an h1 tag here? I did put an h1 tag, color, did we do styles.css? We did. Okay, let's check this one more time. Let's go here and empty cache and hard reload, and there you go. Okay, so now we get it blue. So sometimes you do need to reload this. The way I did that was I inspected element, right click on the search button, and hit empty cache and hard reload. That reset the cache and loaded my style sheet, and now you can see my h1 tag has the color blue. Okay, let's get rid of that now, and let's go back to app.py and do the fun stuff now, which is loading our SpaceX data. All right, so to load our SpaceX data, we're going to use something known as an API. Now, an API is an application programming interface. Really, all that means is we have some predefined methods or ways of interacting with a different system. So in our case, we're interacting with a very, very simple API, which provides something known as a GET endpoint. A GET endpoint is simply something that you can retrieve. You can't control data. You can't send any data to it. You simply get some data from it. In this case, we want to get these SpaceX launches. To hit a GET endpoint, we're going to use this request library right here, and we're going to put this inside of a function. So we're going to say define fetch underscore SpaceX underscore launches. Okay, this is just a normal Python function like you would have seen before. We're going to say the URL is equal to https://api.spacexdata.com/v4/launches. Now this just gives us access to all of the upcoming and previous launches. Very straightforward. We don't need any authentication tokens or anything like that. We can just use this URL. Next, we're going to say our response is equal to requests.get. Now we're using .get because we're getting some data. Now we're going to get the data from this URL. And the reason why I've called this response here is because we have a response anytime we send a request. So what happens here is we send a GET request where we're getting some data from this URL. It's going to take a second and generate a response for us. Now we're going to check if the response.status code is equal to 200, which means this was successful. And if it was, we're going to return the response.json. Now this is going to be a Python dictionary which contains all of the different keys and values associated with our SpaceX launches. We're then going to say else. And we're just going to return an empty array here because that means for some reason, if the response code was not 200 or the status code was not 200, that this was unsuccessful, meaning we have no SpaceX launch data to show. So now what we can do is we can say launches is equal to fetch SpaceX launches like that. And what this will do is immediately when our app starts running, it will call this function. get the launches, and then allow us to store that in this variable where for now, we can actually print this out. So I'm just going to print launches at index 0, just so we get access to the first launch, because this is going to give us an array of all of the different pieces of launch data. So we just want to view one of them, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm going to save this here, and I'm not sure if my app is running. It doesn't look to be running, so I'm going to run this, and you can see that as soon as it runs, it gives me a bunch of information here about the first launch that was received from my SpaceX API. Now, it's a little bit difficult to read here, but you can see that we have a Python dictionary that contains a bunch of keys with a bunch of different values. So this is all the data we can use and visualize and display on our front end whenever we decide to do that. Now, if you want a better view of this, you can go directly to the SpaceX GitHub page, which I'll link in the description, and it shows you all of the data that's going to be returned for one individual launch. So we can look at this later on, but this will just kind of give you all of the keys in case there's some other information that you want that I'm not showing you in this video. Okay, so let's get out of that now. Let's remove the print statement. And what I actually want to do now is I want to go through all of my different launches because I have a bunch of them, and I want to categorize them as either successful, failed, or upcoming. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to write a function here called categorize_launches, like that. We're going to take in the launches and we're going to categorize them. So we're going to say successful is equal to, and this is actually going to be filter launches. And then I'm going to write something here that's not going to make a ton of sense, but just bear with me. And I'm going to say lambda x success and not x upcoming. Now, what I'm essentially doing here is I'm looking through this launches array, which is going to have a bunch of launch data for all the individual launches, and I'm filtering this using the filter function in Python. Now, what filter will do is take all of my launches and look at this function right here, which is an anonymous function I'm going to talk about in a second. And if this function returns true, it's going to take that data and put it inside of this filtered list. Otherwise, it will not. So what I'm checking here is, okay, a launch is successful if the key success is true and we do not have the key upcoming, or that upcoming key is none or false or something along those lines. Now, the way that Lambda works is this is like writing a one-line anonymous function. So rather than doing something like define is success like that and taking in launch and then say returning launch success and not launch upcoming, I've replaced this function with this right here. So I essentially said, okay, I have some anonymous function that I'm not going to give a name called a lambda function. We're going to take in one parameter x, which is going to represent our launch. We're then going to look at x and say, okay, does it have the success key? And if it has the success key and doesn't have the upcoming key, or this is false or none, then that means that this is successful. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense, but this function right here and this function here are exactly the same thing. This one just doesn't have a name, which allows me to write it directly in line rather than writing it up there. Now, I'm also just going to wrap this in a list just so that we get this as a list type, because filter actually returns something a little bit different. So we want to convert that to a list. Okay, so next we're going to say failed is equal to, and we're going to copy this exact same thing, and we're just going to change the condition slightly. So now we're going to say if not success and not upcoming. Okay, so we've just kind of switched this around now, so we don't want this to be successful. And then lastly, we're going to say upcoming is equal to, and we're going to paste this, and now we're just going to put upcoming. So if it's upcoming, then this means it's, well, upcoming. Okay, then we're going to return a Python dictionary here, and we're going to say successful is equal to successful, failed is equal to failed, and upcoming is equal to upcoming. Okay, perfect. So now what we can do is we can take our launches, we can grab them, and then we can categorize them. So I'm going to copy categorize launches, and I'm just going to wrap this other function, which will contain all of our launches. And now we can say, not console log, but print launches, and we can see what we get. So let's go up here. Let's run this. And we got an issue here saying function object is not iterable. Okay, so the reason for this is that we actually need to put the function first before we put the array or before we put the list. My apologies here, guys, but I'm just going to kind of fix this up by putting launches at the end. So let's go launches, and is it here? Yes, launches like that. Okay, so I think that's going to fix that up for us. Let's run this now. And you can see that we get all of our data. I thought it was not going to print quite everything, but you can see that, yes, this is working. We can't really see if it's categorized or not, but just take my word for it. I'm just going to exit out of this because it's completely lagging my terminal. And yeah, let's not print that. Let's instead display that on our front end. So here is where we actually get into being able to now take this data that we have and display that to the front end. Now to do that, we can actually pass this data as a variable to our template and then view it in the template. So to do that, we're going to go to our render template right here. Right after the name of the template, we're actually going to put the name of a variable. In this case, it's going to be launches, and we're going to make this equal to launches, okay, which is the variable down here. Now what this does is it just makes available all of this data inside of our template. So now what I could actually do is I could go here, and inside of set of two braces, I can use launches. So I could do something like launches 0 dot or accessing whatever key I want, and I could display that to the screen. So let me show that to you now. What we're going to do is loop through all of the different launches and just display them in some random order. Then we can actually sort them, and we can start displaying them in a bit more of a kind of organized manner. All right, so to do this, to be able to actually loop through all of these launches here, we can actually write a Python for loop inside of our code. To do that, we're going to put two braces. We're going to put 2% signs inside of here, and we're actually going to use a for-like syntax. Now, I know this seems a little bit weird. Just bear with me as I go through this, but we're going to say for launch in launches dot, and then we can access the successful, failed, or upcoming launches. In this case, let's just look at the successful launches, because remember, we're accessing a Python dictionary that contains successful, failed, and upcoming, right? So we're going to say for launch in launches.successful. Then we're going to do a %% here, and we're going to end the for. So whenever we have some block here in Django, we have to start the block, and then we have to end the block. So we have for, and we're kind of ending the for loop here. And then inside of here, we can write whatever we want to render every single time we view one of the launches. So we can keep this super simple for now, and we can create a div. And then inside of the div, we can do something like a paragraph tag. And for now, we'll do something like name : and then this is going to be associated with whatever the name is. So I just need to look at my cheat sheet here to see what the name actually is. And it looks like this is going to be simply two sets of braces here, and then launch.name. Okay, we can also just do the date, just so we can see that. So we'll do date, and then this is going to be launch dot, and I believe this is date _ UTC. Okay, so let's just do this for now and see if that's actually going to work. Okay, so we have our for loop. We have a little div that we're rendering for each one of our launches, and then we're just displaying some information in paragraph tags. So if we go back here and we refresh now, oh, it looks like it's not running. So let's rerun our web server, Python app.py. Sometimes it does crash, by the way, guys, if you have some invalid syntax. Don't worry about that. And you can see here that now we're listing out all of the successful launch information. We just have the name and the dates. Obviously, we want to make this look a lot better, and we can actually move on to doing that now. All right, so now that we know how to render some of this data, let's actually render it in that kind of tabulated list where we have successful, failed, and upcoming. Now, I'll show you how we can do that using Bootstrap and actually no JavaScript at all. So I'm just going to start here by adding an h1 tag, and I'm just going to put a little title for my website, so SpaceX launch timeline, or I can actually just do launches. That's fine. Then down here, I'm going to create kind of a navigation container. So I'm going to say UL for unordered list. And I'm going to say for the class of this, we're going to have nav and nav tabs. Now, the reason I can use these classes is because I have Bootstrap, right? So that's how I'm actually able to use these. Okay, so I have nav tabs. I'm going to do li for a list item. I'm going to say class is equal to li, or not li, nav dash item like that. And then I'm going to create an A tag here or a hyperlink where I'm going to say class is equal to nav-link. And then I'm going to make this active because this is the one that I want to be active to start. I'm going to say data and then dash toggle is equal to tab. And I'm going to say my href is equal to, and this is going to be a pound and then successful like that. Okay, then inside of here, I'm going to call this successful. Now I'm going to copy this and I'm going to do the same thing twice more, but I'm just going to change this to be failed and upcoming. And we need to get rid of active on these. And then we're going to change these to be corresponding, right? So failed and upcoming. Okay. So what will actually happen is when we click on these, it's going to toggle a different div, which you're going to see in 1 second, which will kind of change the tab that we're on to be either successful, failed, or upcoming. So now we can go down here, we can create that kind of toggled tab. So we're going to say div class is equal to tab-container, or tab-content, sorry. Inside of the div, we're going to create 3 divs. The first div is going to have an ID of successful. And then the other 2 divs are going to have the same ID, right? Not the same ID, but the ID corresponding with what they're going to hold, which is failed and upcoming. Now we also just need to add some classes here. So we're going to say class is equal to container tab-pane, and then we're going to make this active to start. And then here, we're going to say the class is equal to container tab-pane, and then fade, which is going to be the animation style. And then we're going to take the same class. We're going to copy this down here to upcoming. Now inside all of these, we're going to take this for loop and we're going to paste it inside. Okay, so here we're going to render the successful ones. Here we're going to render the failed ones. And I'm going to show you an easier way to do this in 1 second. And here we are going to render the upcoming ones. Okay, so I think that's actually all we need for right now. There might be a bit of CSS that we're going to want to write, but I think this is actually okay for right now. So let's make sure that our web server is running. It looks like it is. And we're going to test this out and see if these tabs actually work now when I refresh the page. So you can see that it now shows successful, failed, and upcoming. If I click into failed, you can see it actually changes what's being displayed, and same with all of these. Again, this is working because of Bootstrap and because we imported all of those different kind of classes, right? Now we still have this in blue. I think if I go here and empty the cache, it's going to go back to black. Okay, perfect. All right, so now we have our different tabs here. We're switching between at least the correct types of launches that we want to be viewing. Now what I want to do is make these look a bit nicer, right? Where we have an image and we have some more information because, well, this is kind of difficult to read and it's not very useful for us right now. So what I want to do is I want to change essentially the div that I'm rendering for each one of my kind of elements or entries. Now the issue is, or the thing that we want to consider is that I don't really want to write the same code 3 or 4 different times. Ideally, I just want to be able to display kind of a component for each one of my launches, right? So each of my launches has the same pieces of information, and we just want to kind of inject that and show that inside of these 3 different for loops. So the way we can actually do this is we can write something known as a macro or kind of a sub template that we can use inside of this template, which is where the power of the Jinga templating engine comes in. So I'm going to go to templates here. I'm going to make a new file, and I'm going to call this my launchcard.html. Now inside here, I'm going to write essentially the kind of beginning of this file, which is known as a macro. So I'm going to call this macro, and then I'm going to say render _ launch, which is going to be the name of my macro. And I can put any parameters in here just like I would normally have for a function. So essentially what I'm saying is, okay, I want a macro, which is going to be something I can call from inside of another template, acts very similarly to a Python function. I'm calling it render launch, and I need to pass in some launch data. So that's what we're taking in as this parameter. Then similarly to my other blocks, I need to end this. So I'm going to say end macro like that. And now inside of here, anything I put is going to be returned as HTML when we use this macro. So I'm going to make a div. I'm going to say this is class launch card. We're actually going to style this ourselves, which we'll do in a minute. And then inside of this div for right now, we're just going to keep it nice and simple. And I'm just going to copy my name and my date and just put it inside of here so we can see how this works. So now that we have this macro, we're going to go back to index and we're going to replace the divs that we have here by using that macro. Now to use the macro, we need to go up to the very top of our template and we need to import the macro. So to do this, we're going to say %% from, and we're going to say launch _ card.html, which is the name of our template, right? So launch card.html. We're going to import the macro we want, which is render launch. Okay. So if we go here, you can see that it's called render launch and we're importing that so that we now have access to it inside of this file. So let's go up here. Now that we have access to it, we can use it just like a normal Python function. So I can go inside of my for loops now. I'm going to do 2 sets of braces again, and I'm going to say render launch, and I'm going to pass to this my launch. And I'm just going to copy this and paste this here inside of all of my for loops. Okay, and now we're going to be using that macro inside of the for loops. Okay, so let's go here and let's refresh and notice that everything works completely fine, but now we're using the macro rather than writing the same code multiple times inside of this template. Great. Now let's go to the macro and let's actually start making this look decent and displaying some more data. So the first thing I want to display is the image. Now, not all of our launches are going to have images, so we actually first need to check if we do have an image. To do that, we can actually use an if statement. So we're going to say, again, inside of this kind of % block, if launch.links.patch.large. So we're looking for a large image, essentially. And then we're going to end our block. So %end if. And if we do have that image, we're just going to display it. So we're going to say image source is equal to, and inside of here, we need to use our set of braces, right? So what we'll do is we'll simply take the launch.links.patch.large, which is a URL to an image, and we'll display that. We're going to have the alt text, just so we don't get a warning in HTML here, being equal to the launch.name. And we'll just add a class here for styling in a second, and we'll call this the launch-image. Perfect. So now if we do have an image, we are going to display that. Otherwise, I'm going to make a div, or I guess not otherwise, but after this, I'm going to make a div. This is where we're going to put kind of the main content for our launch. Inside the div here, let's give ourselves some space. The first thing we probably want to do is just display the name of our launch. So we're just going to say div class is equal to the launch-title. Let's end our div, and we're going to put the launch.name right there. After this, we're going to put the launch details. So we're actually going to do another if here, and we're going to say if launch.details, because not all of them have details. Then we are going to say inside of a paragraph tag, so let's do a p tag here, launch.details. This is that short little description about the launch. And then we're going to end our if statement. So we're going to say end if like that. If you couldn't tell by now, anything inside of this block will only happen if this condition is true. So if we have details, we'll display the details. Beneath that, we want to display the date. So we're going to put another p tag here, and we're going to put inside of our braces launch.date_UTC. Okay, perfect. We're going to continue here, and now we're going to have a div, and this is going to have the links for our launch. So we're going to say class is equal to the launch links. We're going to end our div like that, and we're going to put our different links. So here we're going to have an a tag. Okay, let's end our a tag. The first one is going to be the Reddit launch. The href for this is going to be equal to, inside of some parentheses, 2 sets of braces, and then launch.links.reddit.launch. Okay, so that's the first one. We're also going to say target is equal to _blank. Now that's going to open this in a brand new page or a brand new tab, which is what we want. We're then going to take this and we are going to put the other links. So the next one we want is the launch.links.article, like that. We're going to change this to the article. And then the last one that we want here is the Wikipedia. So launch.links.wikipedia. Wikipedia, if we could spell that correctly, and we'll just say Wikipedia, like that. Okay, so I think that's going to be good. Now all we need to do is the styling, but before we hop over to the styling, let's just quickly make sure this is working fine. Okay, yeah, so you can see we're getting kind of a huge image, name, description, date, and then we are getting the different links here. So obviously we want to style this a little bit just so it looks a little bit easier to read. To do that, we're going to go to styles.css here, and I'm just going to actually copy in some styles. So I'm not going to kind of type them all out because it is a little bit time consuming. If you want all of these, again, you can get them from the link in the description for the GitHub. You also can just pause the video and write them out. Before my launch card, so keep in mind the launch card is this right here. I want to have it kind of appearing a little bit like a little bit of depth on the page. So you'll see that we have a bit of a shadow, which I've added here. I have a border radius, giving that a little bit of rounding on the border on the edges. I have a margin top, so this is going to space us 20 pixels off the top of the screen and between all of the other launch cards. I have a border just so we can kind of see the actual card. We have some padding for the content inside of there. And then I've said display flex, flex direction row, and align item center. What that's going to do is actually take our image and our div content here and make it so that they're kind of structured properly in that box. So the image is to the left and the content is to the right. I also added a hover effect here, so when we hover over top of the box, we can see that appearing on the screen. And then I've resized my launch image so it's 100 by 100, so it's not so massively large, with a little bit of margin and kind of border radius here. Well, actually, I don't think we need the border radius for the image, but either way, we'll leave it. And then for the launch title, we've just made this bold with a margin bottom. And for the links, we've just added some margin to the right so that they're spread out a little bit. So again, you can pause this video and copy it all in, or you can just take this from the GitHub. So now that we have that, let's go here and refresh. We're going to need to right click here and empty cache and hard reload. When we do that, we're going to see that we get our images now appearing properly, although they do take a second to load. And you can see as I scroll down here, I get all of my different content or all of my different launches and the information about them. We also can go to failed. Now we'll see all of the failed launches, and same thing here with the upcoming launches that are happening soon. So there you go. That is visualizing all of the SpaceX data. Now, one thing you might be looking at here is why we have kind of the time appearing with the Z and whatnot. I'll quickly show you how we can strip that off. Then we're going to get into the deployment process here so we can see how to actually deploy this application out. All right, so to strip that kind of annoying and ugly part of the date off, we're going to create something known as a template filter. A little bit of a more advanced feature, but if you're already at this point in the video, then you probably don't mind viewing this. To do that, we're going to go inside of our app.py. It doesn't really matter where you do it, but I'm going to say at app dot and then template underscore filter. Now the filter is going to be named date underscore only. Make sure you use an underscore, don't use any spaces. And we're going to define a function, which is date only filter. Now we're going to take in S here. Essentially what we're doing is we're writing a function that we're going to have access to from inside of our template. So to be able to access some custom functions, which can do things like process data or strip strings, which is what we're doing, we need to write them as a template filter. Inside of here, we're going to say the date object is equal to datetime.strp time, which is strip time. We're going to put an S, which is our string, and I'm going to just copy in a format here. Again, you can get this from the GitHub, but it's not too complicated, which is this. So what I'm essentially saying here is I want to strip off the time. This is what my string is. This is the format of that string. So that string looks like this. What this will now do is it will just grab for us the actual date from that. So it's going to strip the time off using the datetime library. There's a bunch of other ways to do this, but this is one way to do that. I'm then going to return the date object dot date like that. And then that can be rendered onto the screen. Okay, so now we have this template filter. To use the template filter, we just have to go to our launch card. And now what we're going to do is we're essentially going to apply the filter, which you probably haven't seen before. To apply the filter, we simply go to where our date is. So where is our date? Our date is, why can I not find it? Okay, right here, date UTC. We're going to put a pipe operator or the or sign, depending on the language you write in. And we're going to do date underscore only. Now it's going to look like it's an error here, but this is valid. What this is doing is taking whatever this content is and essentially passing it into this function, which is the template filter, which will strip off that part of the date. So now if we go here and we refresh, you'll see that if this is running, which it's not, so let's go here and refresh, that we get our date appearing on the screen with that stripped off content. Okay, so that is going to wrap up the coding aspect of this video. Now we actually want to deploy this out, which is not going to take us too long. But before we can deploy this, we do need to put it on GitHub. So I'm going to upload this to GitHub. This will be the same link that you can use from the description. So you can actually just copy this link for the rest of the video. What we're going to do, though, is SSH into our Linode virtual private server. And we're going to use this to actually host our application. Give me a second to get set up here, and then we'll go ahead and do that. All right, so I just uploaded all of this code to GitHub. Again, it'll be linked in the description. And now that we have this on GitHub, we can SSH into our server and start setting it up for deployment. To do this, we need to go back to Linode, and we're going to copy the SSH access command for the server that we spun up. So I'm going to copy this right here. And I'm just going to go to any terminal environment. In this case, I'm in VS Code. Doesn't matter if you're on Mac, Linux, Windows, this will always be the same. And I'm just going to paste this command in. So SSH root at, and then the IP address of your server. Go ahead and hit enter, and then enter the root password. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and enter that if I can type it correctly. And assuming that I type it correctly, it should actually log me into the server. Now it looks like I spelt that one incorrectly, so there we go. Now we are in. Okay, so I'm just going to clear the screen here, and you can see that now I'm kind of in this terminal environment. Let me zoom in a little bit. From here, we're just going to update the server to make sure it has the most recent packages, and then we're going to start setting up Python and a Python web server to kind of host our Flask web server. Seems a little bit weird, but we need something so that when we turn the Linode on and back off, it actually spins up the server again and makes sure it keeps running. There's a few basic things we need to set up in terms of the firewall and all of that kind of stuff. So the first command is going to be sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade, like that. Now this could take a few minutes depending on kind of how outdated the Linode actually is, but we can see here that it wants to install this many bytes of additional space. So I'm going to go ahead and hit yes, and once this is finished, I'll be right back. All right, so that is finished now. The next thing we need to do is install a few packages that we're going to be using. So we're going to type sudo apt install nginx, like that. Okay, so let's get that installed. Yes, 20 megabytes, that is fine. Okay, so give that a second to run. Should be done in 1 second. Okay, so that is finished. We're also just gonna make sure we have Python 3. So I'm gonna type Python 3 here. It looks like we do have that. We're gonna type pip3, just make sure we have that. So we don't have that. That means we're gonna install pip3. So sudo apt install Python 3 -pip, like that. We need to install pip so that we're actually able to download Flask and download requests, which are the libraries that we need for our application to work. So once that's finished, I'll be right back. All right, so that is done. Let's clear the screen here. Now we're going to use pip3 to install the dependencies that we need. So we're going to say pip3 install Flask and requests. But we're also going to install one more package that we didn't use before, but we're going to use here, which is Junicorn, which is going to act kind of like a wrapper around our Flask web server. There's a bunch of different stuff we're using. Don't worry about it a ton. I'm just showing you the most simple, fastest possible setup for deploying this. So Flask, requests, and Junicorn is what we need. We're going to go ahead and press enter here and download all of those. I think we are good here, even though it was giving us kind of some error messages. Looks like that's fine though. Let's clear this, and now we are going to test our application using Junicorn. Now, what we need to do is we need to get the app from our local computer to our remote virtual private server. To do that, we're going to use Git. Let's see if Git is installed. Git is not installed, so we're going to type sudo apt install Git, like that. Yes, we're going to go ahead and install Git. Once we have Git, then we can git clone the repository on here, which is going to be the easiest way to do this. So I'm going to go back to GitHub. I'm going to copy this URL here again from the link in the description, and we're going to clear and type git clone and then paste that URL. Now, when we do this, it's going to take this repository and simply clone it on this computer. That's the easiest way to get this. So now if we type ls, we can see that we have the SpaceX visualization. So we're going to cd into that right here, type ls, and notice we have our app.py, readme, static, and templates, exact same as we had on our local computer. Let's clear this. Now that we're inside of that directory, we're going to test the app. Now to test the app, we can use Junicorn. So we're going to say Junicorn like that, and then app:/app. Now the first name here is going to be the name of your Python file, which in this case is app.py. The second name is going to be the name of whatever you named this variable. So ideally, you just named it app like I did, but if you named it like main or something, then you need to replace this second app with main, okay? So now that we have that, we're going to go ahead and hit enter. And what this is going to do is spin up this Flask server for us. So as long as this is all working and everything got booted up like it has right here, we're good to go and we can move on to the next steps. We just wanted to test out that this was indeed working. Okay. So what we're going to do here is just exit out of this by hitting Control-C on your keyboard. Control-C should just quit that for you. And now that we've done that, we can go to setting up kind of the firewall and the service, which is going to run this application for us. Now, this is going to seem a little confusing if you've never done this before, but just bear with me. These are just some kind of basic commands we need to run through. Again, you don't need to kind of focus a ton on what exactly is happening here for this deployment. So first of all, we're using something called Nginx. Now, Nginx essentially is going to allow us to proxy data that comes into our server through a specific port such that it accesses our Flask web server. Seems a little bit weird, but anytime you're accessing any device over the internet, you're going through a specific port. In this case, we're going to be going to the IP address of our server from a specific port. We're then going to forward the data from that port to wherever our Flask web server is running, which is locally on this computer, and then take that data and return it back out that port so we can render the HTML. So Nginx is responsible for that, and that's what we're going to be setting up here, which is kind of the complicated aspect. So what we're going to do is type sudo, standing for super user do, and we're going to rm or remove the etc/nginx/sites enabled/default. Okay. Now, what this will do here is remove the default configuration of Nginx so that we can actually add our own configuration. So now for our new configuration, we're going to type sudo nano etc nginx/sites-available. Okay, so let's spell available correctly, which I appear to have issues with. Let me see if I spelt this right. Okay, it looks like I'm not going crazy. /, and for now we can just call this Flask, but you can really call this whatever you want. So just make sure you remember what you call this here. What we're doing is we're opening up a text file inside of etc nginx sites available, and the file is called Flask, okay? So make sure you remember that name. So we have Flask here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to paste in some code. So just copy this code out right here. Server, brace, we're listening on port 80, server name, your domain or IP. So what we need to go here to our domain or IP, is we need to put in the IP address of our server. Okay, so to do that, we're going to go back to Linode. We're going to copy the IP address, and we're just going to paste that inside of here. And all of this stuff here, we can actually just leave the same, except we're going to change this port right here from 8,000 to 5,000, which is the port that our Flask application is running on, okay? So we have, you can't really see it here, I need to go up, server, listening on port 80, this is the name of our server, location, / open brace, proxy pass, this means we're now passing whatever data comes into port 80 to this location right here, which is localhost port 5000, where our Flask server is running. And then we set up a few things here. Don't need to worry too much about those, but you do need those, okay? Then we close the brace, close the additional brace, save this with Control S, okay? Control S on your keyboard saves. Control X is going to quit. Okay, if we open that up again, you can see this is what we have. Pause the video if you need to copy this in. Okay, Control X, we're out of there. Now what we're going to do is create what's known as a symbolic link between the folder that we just made and the sites enabled directory. I know, seems weird. Bear with me here. We're going to type sudo ln-s. We're going to do /etc/nginx/sites-available. And then we're going to put Flask here, okay? Next, we're going to do /etc/nginx/sites enabled. Okay, so we're linking our sites available to our sites enabled. Okay, now that we have that, we hit enter. It's going to create the symbolic link for us. Now we need to restart the Nginx service. To do that, we're going to type sudo systemctl restart Nginx. Okay, that's going to restart Nginx, which will load this configuration file for us. Now we are going to run our Flask application, and we'll be good to go. All right, sorry, I just wanted to clear the screen so we have a bit more space here. But I'm going to type Junicorn app:/b 127.0.0.1:5000. Okay, -b, and then this :5000. Now, when I run this, it should start running the Flask server for us. And fingers crossed, if we did everything correctly, we should be able to access this by going to the IP address of our server. So if I copy the IP address of my server here, and I paste this into my web browser, you should see that it actually brings us to the SpaceX launches page. Okay, it's not secure. It's not going to be secure because we didn't set up HTTPS, but you can see that we have access to that data. Okay, there you go. That's it. We're now able to actually run our Flask application from this virtual private server. Now, the only thing here is that if we do actually close this SSH session, so if I kind of quit out of this window here, you'll see that our app actually stops running. Now, that's not what we want. Instead, what we want is that this is going to run no matter what. So to fix that, we simply need to stop this by hitting Control-C, and we need to use a command called no-up or no-h-up or whatever you want to call it. I don't know how you say it, but it's called no-hup like that, okay? So we're going to type no-hup, and then we're going to put in the exact same command that we just ran. So we're going to go here, like this, no-hup. Again, not sure if that's how you say that or not. We're going to hit enter, and now this essentially disconnects this from the local terminal session, meaning that even if we close this SSH session, our website will still continue to run. So if I go ahead here and hit enter, you're going to see we get this kind of little message that pops up. That's fine. But now if I go here and we refresh again, so you can see website is loaded. It's fine. It's popping up. We're not getting any kind of issues here. And there we go. And then I can go ahead and close this SSH session if I want to, and it will still be running. All right. So I think with that said, that's going to wrap up the video here. That's everything you need to know when it comes to visualizing SpaceX launches. Now, I understand this is not the most visually appealing or exciting thing you could possibly be looking at. However, I wanted to show you how you can get all of this data, load it from an API, do some more advanced stuff with Flask, host this application. I wanted to give you guys a ton of different pieces of value so that you can go and make this website as cool as you want, visualize some different pieces of data, show it in a cooler manner, whatever it is that you want to do. If you guys do work on a really cool project related to this, please let me know in the comments down below. With that said, I'm going to wrap it up here. Big thanks to Linode/Akamai for sponsoring this video again. Make sure you take advantage of that free $100 credit by clicking the link in the description. And with that said, I will see you guys in another YouTube video.